In this lesson, we'll be talking about another of the common issues you'll need to adjudicate in sentence corrections on the verbal section of the executive assessment, articles and pronouns. So let's start by just recapping the question logistics for this type on the executive assessment. You'll want to assume that there are 3 to 5 sentence corrections in every 14 question verbal section. You'll want to assume that there are somewhere between 1 to 3 sentence corrections in each of the 7 question halves, and that this is going to be the question with the least to read for any verbal section question format. So strategically, that means you want to assume about a 90-second per question average. You're going to have a maximum of 2 minutes for any of these sentence corrections. And you're going to want to minimize to a single reread before you must eliminate and guess to save time. Do beware of listening for errors because, unfortunately, most people's quote unquote ear for English is not necessarily that great. And you want to instead look for differences indicating possible common sentence correction issues, such as those involving articles and pronouns. So, to seek article and pronoun errors in the executive assessment, first you want to look for subtle single word changes. You'll also want to carefully track your reference for any article or pronoun introduced in the sentence as written as soon as it appears in the underlined section. You'll also want to note changes in number or person for any noun in the sentence as written. Now, strategically, this means that you want to deliberately read the sentence as written to catch minor differences indicating definitive article or pronoun errors. You'll want to categorically interrogate each article and pronoun in every choice and the sentence is written as soon as one issue proves to be erroneous. And you have to assume that errors can potentially be fixed in the choices. So make sure that you're carefully proving that, in fact, the pronoun or article is misused, is ambiguous, isn't matching in number for person or the noun. This can also be a great way to efficiently evaluate those longer underlines. If you catch the one word that is a definitive article or pronoun error, those longer underlined sentence corrections can become much more efficient to evaluate. You also want to avoid wasting time trying to categorically define whether that's an object pronoun or a subject pronoun. We'll do a little bit of that here in this lesson, but you don't want to do it on the exam because it's unnecessary and you don't get extra points for being able to say that's an object pronoun or that's a possessive pronoun. And of course, as always, read your choice back into the sentence. And when you're considering article and pronoun issues, you want to confirm that there are no ambiguities and there's no error in terms of that number, in terms of the person or the number of the noun. So let's start by just defining what a definite and indefinite article is and how to properly select those articles. So an indefinite article is going to be used to refer to a non-specific item, and that's going to be a or an. A definite article is the, and the or the is always used to refer to a specific item. And so you can see this illustrated in the example. It's the difference between I want a beagle, which means that I will accept any beagle, versus I want the beagle, which indicates that there is a specific beagle that is desired as opposed to just any beagle. And you have to carefully note whether the sentence's intended meaning requires a definite or indefinite usage. So let's take a look at a sample sentence correction. So as always, we're going to read the sentence as written up front. Focusing on the sources of irrigation, India's expansion of groundwater well irrigated area had the larger effects on productivity growth than did an expansion of canal irrigated area. So we always need to identify the articles in the underline. And here we've got the larger effects and an expansion. So you'll want to compare those articles against those in the non-underlined and ultimately in the choices that we've introduced to evaluate which should be the correct answer. So we've got focusing on the sources of irrigation. We've got India's expansion of groundwater well irrigated area. And India's expansion of this type of area is a specific expansion. So we need that an expansion or some clarification of what type of expansion it is. But the larger effects, those are specific larger effects. And we've got to determine if we need a definite or indefinite article for those larger effects. And in this case, we need to consider the logical intent more than just abstractly matching to the grammar, because you can see that there's a the in the non-underlined portion, but I don't need these larger effects to be specific larger effects. They're just generic larger effects. So the a larger effect in choices D or E is going to be the more proper usage because there's just a generic larger effect on productivity growth as opposed to specific larger effects or a single specific larger effect as indicated by choices A, B, and C. So we can eliminate each of those off of this one issue, just knowing that it should be a larger effect as opposed to the larger effects or the larger effect. Then you have to beware of subtly disappearing terms. So you can see that the only difference between choices D and E is the omission in choice E of that definite article of the expansion. It just becomes expansion of canal irrigated area. And we always have to consider the meaning. And if we're going to consider the meaning, you have to default to the original intended meaning. And the originally intended meaning was about India's expansion, a specific expansion, and it called out an expansion for India. So just getting rid of that article "and" without replacing it with "the" as a definitive or definite article expansion, a specific expansion of canal irrigated area that was conducted by India, we change the meaning of this sentence markedly. So choice E is out. And as always, we read our choice back into the original to confirm that it captures the originally intended meaning. So focusing on the sources of irrigation, India's expansion of groundwater well irrigated area had a larger effect on productivity growth than did the expansion compared to the expansion of groundwater well irrigated area conducted by India of canal irrigated area. And choice D does properly capture the originally intended meaning without introducing any sort of ambiguities or confusion, and we'd select it on the exam. So let's talk about person as it pertains to pronouns. Now, pronouns are going to refer to other nouns, objects, or subjects within a sentence. So, Stefan, he went to the store. So we know who Stefan is. Stefan has been established, and he refers to Stefan. So you don't have to keep saying the same noun over and over again. But within a narrative, perspective dictates pronouns as well. So let's talk about how you're going to identify the different perspectives in terms of person. So first person is when the narrator is the actor. So the narrative story would be something such as I went to the store and I bought a hat. The narrator, however, being the actor is rare in the GMAT sentence corrections. It's not saying that it can't happen, but it's not likely to be used. Same with second person. In the second person, the reader is the actor and is being spoken to directly by the narrator. So that's when a story says, you must go to the store so you can buy a hat. And the reader is the you who apparently needs to buy a hat. The most common perspective used by GMAT sentence corrections is going to be the third person. And that's where the narrator is not part of the story. So that's where you're going to see Stefan, he went to the store, and the narrator is neither Stefan nor is Stefan the reader. So Stefan is just being spoken about in some fashion. And that is the perspective that is used most commonly in the GMAT sentence corrections. So let's define some of these pronouns. So subject pronouns are actor pronouns. So they are going to refer to whatever is the main actor of the sentence or some entity that is committing an action within the sentence. So your singular first person pronoun is going to be I. I do something, I did something. Simple enough. Your plural first person subject pronoun is going to be we. We did something, we are going to do something, something of that nature. Now, your object pronouns are pronouns for entities that are being acted upon within the sentence. Now, your singular first person object pronoun is going to be me. It was done to me. They did it to me, something of that nature. Your plural object pronoun is going to be us. It was done to us. They did it to us. Us is being acted upon, not committing the action there. Now, your possessive pronouns are going to indicate ownership. Your first person possessive pronoun for a singular subject is going to be my or mine. These dogs are mine. These are my dogs. Simple enough. Plural possessive first person pronouns are going to be our or ours. So these dogs are ours. These are our dogs. Again, depending on the structure of the sentence, there could be different phrasings, but those are your basic possessive first person first person possessive pronouns. Now, moving on to the second person. And the second person slide is going to be the most simple of all of them. The subject pronouns are the same for whether singular or plural. There is no differentiation between you and the singular or plural for English. There is no yous in English. Not entirely certain as to why that is, but it just is. So this is part of the reason you don't see second person tested all that frequently in sentence corrections because it really makes it simple. There's no differentiation between the singular or plural second person subject pronoun, nor is there a difference between the singular or plural second person object pronouns. And that's because you did it is a proper usage as well as it was done to you. So whether it's a subject or object pronoun in the second person, you will use you. Simple enough. Now, your possessive pronouns are just slightly different. Your singular is going to be your or yours. This is your dog. These are your dogs, or these dogs are yours, however you want to phrase that. Similarly, your plural is going to be the same. So if you've got a group, the people, again, it's kind of weird when you're trying to do it with the second person, but if you're talking to a second person as a group, those are your dogs, and it could be to the group of Americans, for instance. So there's not a lot of differentiation here in your usage for the second person, which is why, again, it's not all that frequently tested on the exam. Now, the third person pronouns are going to be the most relevant. Now, your subject pronouns you're going to have as your singulars he, she, or it. So he did something, she did something, it did something. Now, in terms of gender, you cannot use they or them, the plurals, as a replacement for a singular pronoun. But the GMAT is not going to get into any sort of gender-based debate. They will define the gender of the person in the non-underline clearly so that there's no ambiguity. It will be already defined as a he or a she to avoid any sort of controversy. But just know you cannot replace the singulars he or she with a gender ambiguous singular they. They and them are always going to be plural pronouns in the third person for the purposes of this exam. And of course, your plural subject pronoun is going to be they. Now, for your object pronouns, your singular object pronouns in the third person are going to be him, her, and still it. There is no difference between the singular subject or object pronoun when you're dealing with the third person. But there is a difference with the plural third person or pronoun when it comes to the object versus subject. And this is a differentiation that the exam does like to test because they do something, whereas something was done to them. So the actor in the sentence will be referred to by the pronoun they. The acted upon plural third person pronoun would be them. Then your possessive pronouns in the singular, it's his, hers, or it's going to be its. The ITS is going to be ITS without an apostrophe. If you have IT apostrophe S, that is the contraction it is in English. Its as a possessive does not require an apostrophe. And your plural possessive pronouns are going to be THEIR or THEIRS. So these are their dogs. These dogs are theirs, that sort of thing. Again, depending on the structure of the sentence, either can be used. So in addition to all of those person pronouns, we also have what are known as some other pronouns, some special pronouns, relative pronouns being part of that. So if you're dealing with an entity with agency, if you've already introduced that entity, it will be a who or a whom. You do not want to refer to a person as a which or an it. You have to refer to it as a who or a whom. Now, how do you distinguish between who and whom? Well, who does something. It was done to whom, that thing. So who, you could use a little shortcut to determine whether it should be who versus whom. If you can replace the who with a he, then you should use who. If you can replace the who or whom with a him, then it should be whom, because he did something, who did something. Him didn't do something, so whom can't do something. But something was done to him, not something was done to he, so something would always be done to whom. You can basically just use the pronoun that has an M is always going to be the object pronoun. Now, your objects without agency, as far as relative pronouns go, are going to be that and which. So there are distinct differences between that and which, even though they can be used incorrectly interchangeably in colloquial English. That introduces an essential clause. So that means a clause within the sentence that if you pull that clause, the sentence falls apart. So if you are using the relative pronoun of that to introduce something that is essential to the sentence, you need to use that. But if you're introducing a non-essential clause, so something that if you pulled it out of the sentence could still stand alone, you'll instead use which introduces a non-essential clause. Your plurals for these objects without agency are going to be these or those. So these dogs, those dogs are specific types of dogs. Again, kind of thinking about the articles, they're specific, but those are going to be your plural relative pronouns, these or those. And your special pronouns, where and there, are going to have to refer to a location. You cannot refer to something as a where or a there unless it is definitively a place. Similarly, when and then must refer to a specific time. You cannot refer to anything as a when or a then unless it is an actual time. And what always has to refer to an unknown or actually pose a question. So you can't just without reason, introduce the word what to describe things that are already known in the sentence. So let's take a look at one more sample sentence correction to track some pronouns. So as always, we'll read the sentence as written first. So subtle variations in the inks of stamps with an otherwise identical design may affect these values. So as soon as you find that pronoun, you want to focus on that pronoun. We're not going to even continue reading the sentence because these values. Well, as we introduce the answer choices, these values means that there's some sort of values that have already been introduced in the sentence, and there are no values. And you can't call the stamps themselves a values. So that means without a clear, unambiguous referent that we immediately seek, we know that these values in choices A and B are wrong, and we can eliminate them immediately. Again, if you identify these common issues definitively, they could really speed up your process. Similarly, with choice C, we've got those. There's no those values that have already been introduced in the sentence either, so we can eliminate choice C as well. So we now know that it's got to be their values, meaning the values that are possessed by the stamps, which makes logical sense. You also have to be aware of confusing those subject, object, and possessive pronouns, though, and we can see that at the end of the choices, in choice B, we get a they instead of a them, and the stamps are the object, not a subject within the sentence. So stamps would be a them, not a they, because the subtle variations would be the they. So that is an incorrect use of a subject pronoun when it should be an object pronoun. Similarly, we have to properly apply special and relative pronouns. And we see that in choice E, we introduce a that. So reveal that to be forgeries means that it has to be a specific individual entity prior, and there isn't. It's the stamps, and the stamps are plural. And the stamps have already been identified as their values, referring to the stamps. So we can eliminate choice E, and we know that the stamps need to be of them since we need to use that object third person plural pronoun. Of course, you'll want to then read your choice into the sentence to confirm proper numbering and a lack of ambiguity. So subtle variations in the inks of stamps with an otherwise identical design may affect their values and desirability to philatelists, or reveal them, meaning the stamps, because we've already established that the pronoun is referring to stamps, not the philatelists, to be forgeries. And we then select choice D as being unambiguous and using the proper pronouns throughout. So, to identify pronoun and article issues, first, immediately evaluate articles and pronouns as they're encountered in the original sentence, as written by tracking their clear and proper referent. You'll then want to use the non underlined portion to confirm that each article or pronoun is properly used by matching it to that referent in number and in terms of meaning. And of course, always read your selection back into the sentence to ensure it captures the intended meaning of the original without introducing or kind of perpetuating any ambiguities. So let's move on over to the whiteboard and take a look at a couple of examples together to see how you'll execute on the executive assessment when you encounter these types of issues in the sentence corrections on the verbal section of the exam. So here we have a sample sentence correction that you'll encounter on the verbal section of the exam. So we'll set up the scratch work as we do for every problem of this type. You can see our answer choices A through E and a little line on top for a potential error if we can identify it. Now, when you see a longer underlined portion on a sentence correction, your instincts may say, ew, that's going to take me a while to evaluate it, and maybe I want to move over to another problem. You'll want to suppress that instinct because if you can identify a clear pronoun or article issue, it can actually cut these otherwise time consuming questions down to size and allow you to evaluate and eliminate questions or eliminate choices pretty efficiently. So we'll start from the beginning. The study of human remains recovered in prehistoric, historical, or modern context remained mostly secondary, but never interrupted the hegemony of morphology as its core of investigations prevailing over other approaches. So, this ITS means that it has to be a possessive pronoun. And we need to figure out what is owning something. So something has never interrupted the hegemony of morphology. But the hegemony of morphology cannot possess its own core of investigations. So we have no idea what that its refers to. And so we've identified an ambiguous pronoun. We can label this as a pronoun issue being adjudicated in this question. We can eliminate choice A just for that one problem. Now, if we go to our remaining answer choices, let's go look just at the pronouns. So we can see in choice B that it switched to a there. Well, that just means it's a plural possessive pronoun, and we need to find a plural set of, or plural noun or object or subject that clearly possesses the core of investigations. Now, this would be the modern contexts, prehistoric, historical, or modern contexts, and the contexts don't possess a core of investigations. So choice B is also eliminated. We see the same issue of its, and that its core, it's still the same problem. We don't know what its possesses the core of investigations. So that eliminates choice C. Now we change in choice D to the article of the core of investigations. So this now says that the hegemony of morphology, whatever that means, was or is the core of investigations prevailing over other approaches in the study of human remains. So this at least eliminated the ambiguity. And if we look at choice E, we have a THEIR. That's the same issue as choice B. So we then just read choice D back into the original sentence to confirm that no other ambiguities have been introduced. So the study of human remains recovered in a prehistoric, historical, or modern context remained mostly secondary and never interrupted the hegemony of morphology as the core of investigations prevailing over other approaches. There's no ambiguity here in any of those pronouns or referents. It's a strange sentence to be certain, but if you find this one issue, you'll be in a much better position than if instead you had been, say, evaluating whether it should be prehistoric or a prehistoric modern context. That's going to be a much harder issue to adjudicate. Whereas if you find the pronoun issue, you'll be able to work through this long underline in pretty expedited fashion. So let's scroll on down and take a look at one more example problem. So setting up the scratch pad one more time, we got A, B, C, D, E. Once again, we have a little line over top for a possible error if we identify it in the original sentence. So, starting at the beginning, St. Louis, like other post-industrial cities, maintains vibrant, more organically grown network of artists. So, we always want to clearly track number in any underlined portion. So, maintains vibrant, more organically grown networks of artists could work, or a vibrant, more organically grown network of artists. So right now, this is just an incorrect number. And that may lead me to a pronoun or article issue down the line. So we can eliminate choice A because we know that it would have to be either St. Louis maintains a vibrant network or maintains vibrant, more organically grown networks of artists. The nouns don't match in terms of number along with any possible articles that may be necessary. So if we look at our other answer choices, we've got maintains vibrant, more organically grown networks of the artists for choice B. Well, it's just artists and arts projects generically in the sentences written, so we can eliminate choice B immediately. And you can see that I didn't even keep reading the sentence as I started, because as soon as I identify an error, I can just eliminate A and move on to looking at the answer choice to see any repeaters of that categorical issue. Now, C, we have a vibrant, more organically grown network of artists and arts projects, identifying more clearly with a bohemian ethos. That fixed our issue. You don't want to predict what the fix is necessarily on sentence corrections, but if you find something that gets rid of the issue that you originally identified, that seems like a viable option. You can go a little bit more quickly through the remaining answer choices. Now, a vibrant cannot match multiple networks. So choice D is out for an incorrect matching in terms of the number in the article there. And the vibrant, more organically grown network of the artists. Well, once again, we don't want to produce the definite article for the artists. It's just generically of artists and arts projects. So choice E is out. And we just read choice C back into the original sentence. St. Louis, like other post industrial cities, maintains a vibrant, more organically grown network of artists and arts projects, identifying more clearly with a bohemian ethos. And that eliminates the confusion of number in the articles that were used and captures the intended meaning of the sentence as originally presented. So go ahead and practice some of these pronoun and article style questions on your own to improve this type of sentence correction on the exam.